Elderly widow evicted from home with nephew sleeping in her arms. Little did they know the house was... Dorothy Wilson walked slowly along the cobblestone path she knew by heart, cradling little Tommy in her arms as he slept soundly, despite all the noise that had erupted moments before. Tears streamed down her aged face as she moved away from the imposing two-story colonial home where she had lived the last 45 years of her life. It was when the lawyer appeared at the front door with a folder full of papers that Dorothy knew her life was about to change forever. Dr. Richard Stevens, the son-in-law of her only daughter Margaret, had finally gotten what he wanted. The documents that, according to him, proved the Wilson family home in New York City's Upper East Side no longer belonged to the 70-year-old widow. "Mrs. Wilson, you have 15 minutes to gather your personal belongings and leave," he said, holding up a court order she could barely read through her tears. "But how is this possible, Dr. Stevens? This house has been mine since my husband Robert passed 3 years ago," she replied, clutching the boy tighter to her chest. "Not anymore. The documents clearly show your late husband sold the property to settle debts you didn't even know existed. I simply completed a purchase that was already agreed upon." Dorothy looked up at the second-floor window and saw her daughter Margaret watching everything from behind the lace curtains she herself had embroidered years ago. The 45-year-old woman quickly looked away when her eyes met her mother's, and Dorothy felt her heart break even more. Little Tommy stirred in her arms, murmuring something about wanting water. The boy was the son of her granddaughter Jennifer, who had vanished 6 months earlier, leaving the child in his great-grandmother's care. Dorothy didn't know how to explain to him that they no longer had a home. "Mom, I can't do anything," Margaret called from the window, but she quickly disappeared when her husband stepped in behind her. Dorothy took only a small suitcase with a few clothes and walked toward the wrought iron gate her husband had specially commissioned for her, adorned with delicate floral designs. Every step hurt as if she were walking on broken glass. "Grandma Dorothy, why are we leaving?" Tommy asked, rubbing his sleepy blue eyes. "We're going on an adventure, sweetheart. We'll see new places," and she lied, forcing a smile. The truth was, Dorothy had nowhere to go. Her elementary school teacher's pension was barely enough for basic expenses, and she had devoted her entire life to caring for her family and home. Now, at 70 years old, she found herself on the streets with a 5-year-old boy to raise alone. They spent their first night on a park bench across from the school where Dorothy had worked for 30 years. Tommy thought it was fun to sleep under the stars, but she didn't close her eyes once, wondering what she would do the next day. When the sun rose, Dorothy decided to go to her late husband's old office downtown. Robert Wilson had been an accountant for over 40 years and had always been meticulous with important documents. Maybe she could find something Dr. Stevens didn't know about. "Mrs. Wilson!" Gladys, her late husband's retired secretary, exclaimed when she spotted her on the sidewalk outside the office building. "What are you doing here so early with little Tommy?" "Hello, Gladys. I need to look for some of Robert's papers. Dr. Stevens claims he sold our house, but that doesn't make sense." Gladys lowered her voice and glanced around before speaking. "Mrs. Wilson, there's something strange about all this. Weeks before your Robert passed, I saw Dr. Stevens here in the office going through the files. I thought it was strange because your husband was in the hospital at the time." Dorothy Wilson's heart raced. Robert had spent the last 2 months of his life hospitalized due to diabetes complications, and Dr. Richard Stevens had offered to handle his affairs. At the time, she had been grateful for her son-in-law's help. "Gladys, are you sure about what you're saying?" "Yes, Mrs. Dorothy, and there's more. Just yesterday, I saw Dr. Stevens talking at your Frank's Bakery with a man in a suit I didn't recognize. They were discussing selling a property quickly." Dorothy sat on the park bench with Tommy in her lap, trying to piece together the puzzle. If Dr. Stevens had indeed tampered with her husband's papers without permission, maybe there was a way to prove those documents weren't real. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. "Grandma, can I go play on the slide?" Tommy asked, pointing to the playground. "Of course, sweetheart, but stay where I can see you, okay?" As she watched the boy play, Dorothy noticed an elegant woman approaching, It was her daughter, Margaret, her eyes red from crying. "Mom, forgive me, I brought some things for you both," Jan, she said, handing over a bag with fruit and sandwiches. "Margaret, my dear, you know your husband is lying, don't you?" "Mom, I don't know what to believe anymore. Richard showed me the papers. Everything looks official. He said Dad had huge debts he hid from you. Your father never hid anything from me in 45 years of marriage. We talked about everything, especially money." Margaret sat beside her mother on the bench, watching her son play. "Mom, there's something I need to tell you. Richard has been acting very strange lately. He leaves late at night and doesn't come back until morning. When I ask where he was, he says it's work, but I know it's not true." "How do you know?" "Because I called his office several times in the middle of the night, and the secretary said he wasn't there. And there's more. Yesterday I found a paper in his pants pocket with the name of a real estate agency and a very large amount written on it." Dorothy felt she was getting closer to the truth, but she still needed concrete proof. Margaret had to return home before her husband noticed her absence, but she promised to try and uncover more information. That afternoon, while Tommy napped under a tree, Dorothy went to the county clerk's office. There she ran into her old neighbor, Mrs. Barbara, who had worked there for over 20 years. "Dorothy, what a surprise to see you here. How are you, dear?" "Barbara, I need some information. Could you check if there's been any recent activity on the documents for my house?" "Mrs." Barbara glanced around to make sure no one was listening and typed the address into the computer. "How odd, Dorothy. It shows your house was registered under a company's name 3 weeks ago, Wilson and Stevens LLC. Did you know about this?" "No. I've never heard of that company. Who are the owners?" "Let me see. Robert Wilson and Richard Stevens. But Dorothy, something's very strange here. The signature on the record was dated after your husband's listed date of death in the system." Dorothy's legs trembled. The proof was right there on the computer screen. Dr. Stevens had forged Robert's signature to create a shell company and steal her house. "Barbara, can you print this page for me?" "Of course, but be careful, Dorothy. If this is what I think it is, it's a very serious situation." With the document in hand, Dorothy returned to the park where Tommy waited, now awake and hungry. She shared the sandwich Margaret had brought with him and began planning her next move. As evening fell, a young woman approached them. It was Jennifer, her 23-year-old granddaughter and Tommy's mother. "Grandma! Tommy!" she shouted, running to hug them. "Jen! My dear, where were you? We were so worried," said Dorothy, standing up to embrace her granddaughter. "Grandma, I had to disappear for a while. Tommy's father was chasing me and threatening to hurt you all if I didn't go back to him. But I managed to hide, and I've been working to save up money so I can run away with my son, far from here." Tommy rushed into his mother's arms, and Dorothy couldn't hold back her tears, seeing mother and son reunited. "Jen, so much has happened. Dr. Richard kicked us out of the house, claiming your grandfather sold the property, but I found out he forged the documents." "What do you mean, Grandma? Dr. Richard did that?" Dorothy told her granddaughter the whole story, showing her the document she had gotten from the county clerk's office. Jennifer was outraged. "Grandma, we have to report this. We can't let him steal our home." "It's not that simple, dear. He's a lawyer, he has influence, and we're just ordinary women. Who's going to believe our word over his?" "Then we'll find a way to prove he's lying." "Grandma, where are the original house documents?" Dorothy thought for a moment. Robert always kept important papers in a safe hidden behind a painting in the home office. Only she and he knew about that safe. "They're at home, in your grandfather's secret safe. But how will we get in?" "Dr. Richard changed all the locks." "Grandma, I know Shirley, who's been cleaning the house for over 10 years. She's very fond of you and was heartbroken when she heard you were kicked out. Maybe she can help." It was a risky plan, but Dorothy knew she had to try. Jennifer went to the house and spoke to Shirley during her lunch break. The maid was furious when she learned the truth and agreed to help. The next day, Dr. Richard had a court hearing that would last all afternoon. Margaret would be out shopping at the mall. It was the perfect opportunity for Shirley to leave the back door open for Dorothy to enter. Dorothy left Tommy with Jennifer at the park and headed to her old home. Her heart pounded as she stepped into the garden she had lovingly tended for decades. Shirley was waiting for her in the kitchen, nervous. "Mrs. Dorothy, it's so good to see you again. I'm so sorry for everything that's happened." "Thank you, Shirley. You've always been like a daughter to me. I need to go to the office to get some documents that are rightfully mine." "Go ahead, Mom. I'll keep watch down here in case someone comes." Dorothy climbed the stairs slowly, taking in every corner of the house that had been her home for so long. In the office, everything was different. Dr. Richard had redecorated and placed his own belongings. She walked to the sunset painting Robert had bought her for their 20th wedding anniversary. Behind it was the wall safe. Dorothy entered the code, Tommy's birth date, their first great-grandchild. The safe opened, and there were all the original documents: the house deed, certificates, will, and even a sealed letter with her name written in Robert's handwriting. With trembling hands, she opened the letter. "My dearest Dorothy, if you're reading this, something has happened to me and you need the truth. I discovered Richard is plotting against our family. He has massive gambling debts and thinks he can use our home to get out of trouble. That's why I changed my will without anyone knowing. Our house is fully paid off and registered solely in your name. All the documents are in this safe. Don't trust Richard. Protect our family. I love you forever, Robert." Dorothy felt tears streaming down her face as she read her husband's words. He had foreseen what would happen and prepared to protect her even after he was gone. She took all the documents and placed them in a folder. Just as she was about to leave the office, she heard Dr. Richard's voice downstairs. "Shirley, where's Margaret?" "She went out shopping, Doctor." Dorothy hid behind the door, praying he wouldn't come upstairs. Fortunately, she heard him leave through the front door a few minutes later. Shirley signaled for her to come down quickly. "Mrs. Dorothy, did you get what you needed?" "Yes, Shirley, thank you so much for your help. You might be saving our family." "You've always been good to me, Ma'am. It's the least I can do." Dorothy returned to the park where Jennifer and Tommy were waiting anxiously. When she showed them the documents, her granddaughter couldn't hide her joy. "Grandma, with these, we can prove the house is yours. Let's find a lawyer first thing tomorrow." "No, dear. We'll do things differently. We'll confront Dr. Richard with the evidence and give him a chance to fix this without involving the courts. After all, he's the father of my grandchildren." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just getting started. Now continuing. The next morning, Dorothy asked Margaret to schedule a meeting with Dr. Richard at his office. She said she needed to discuss the house documents and would accept the situation if he helped her find a place to live with Tommy. Dr. Richard agreed to the meeting, thinking it would be easy to convince his mother-in-law to drop any questions. Margaret waited in the lobby while mother and son-in-law talked. "So, Mrs. Dorothy, have you come to accept the facts? The house really isn't yours anymore, but I can help you find a small apartment in a simpler neighborhood." "Dr. Richard, before we make any decisions, I'd like to clear up a few things," Dorothy said, placing the folder of documents on the table. "What things? Everything's already been settled legally. For example, when exactly did my husband sign the papers to create Wilson and Stevens LLC? Dr. Richard paled for a moment, but quickly regained his composure. That was a few days before he was hospitalized. He wanted to tie up loose ends. Interesting, because according to the county clerk's office, the signature was recorded 3 days after his passing, Dorothy said, showing the document she'd gotten from Mrs. Barbara. That must be a clerical error. Sometimes dates get mixed up." "And this letter?" Dorothy placed Robert's letter on the table. "My husband warned me about your intentions long before he left." Dr. Richard stood up, clearly nervous. He tried to grab the letter, but Dorothy was faster. "Mrs. Dorothy, I don't know where you got that letter, but... And here's the original deed to the house, which clearly shows it's been registered in my name alone since 1995, Dorothy continued, showing another document. "Listen here, Mrs. Dorothy. You're getting into deep waters. I've been a lawyer for 20 years, and I know how to make things work in my favor. Are you threatening me, Dr. Richard?" Just then, Margaret walked into the room without knocking. She'd heard raised voices and was worried. "What's going on here? Richard, why are you yelling at my mother?" Margaret, your mother is making up stories, trying to complicate a situation that's already settled. Sweetheart, come here. I need to show you something, Dorothy said, calling Margaret to the table. Margaret read her father's letter with tears in her eyes. Then she looked at the original house documents and the inconsistencies pointed out by Mrs. Barbara. Richard, explain this, she said, her voice trembling. Margaret, are you going to believe this woman instead of trusting your own husband? This woman is my mother, and these documents prove you lied to the whole family. Dr. Richard realized he was cornered. He tried one last move. All right. Maybe I got some dates mixed up, but that doesn't change the fact that I invested a lot of money in renovating the house. Mrs. Dorothy can keep the property, but she'll have to reimburse me. What renovations? Margaret asked. You didn't do any work on the house. Margaret, renovations aren't just visible changes. There's paperwork, legal adjustments. Enough, Margaret shouted. Richard, you deceived my family, forged my father's documents, kicked my mother out of her own home. How could you do this? Margaret, let me explain. No, I don't want to hear your lies anymore. Mom, forgive me for not believing you from the start. Margaret hugged her mother, crying. Dr. Richard tried to approach his wife, but she pulled away. Richard, when we get home, I want you to pack your things and leave. Our marriage is over. Margaret, you can't be serious. We have 2 children together. I have 2 children with a man I thought I knew, but the man standing in front of me now is a stranger. Dr. Richard stormed out of the office, slamming the door. Mother and daughter held each other, finally reunited after so much pain. Mom, let's go home. You're going back where you've always belonged. And what about you, my dear? Will you be okay? Yes, Mom, it'll be hard, but I'd rather rebuild my life on the truth than keep living a lie. When they returned home, they found Jennifer and Tommy waiting at the gate. Shirley had told the young woman that Dorothy had managed to prove the truth. Grandma, we got our house back, Tommy shouted, running to hug his great-grandmother. Yes, we did, my love. And this time, it's forever. Jennifer decided to move back into the family home. With Dr. Richard out of the picture, she felt safe enough to start over with her son. Margaret returned to teaching, the career she'd abandoned after marriage. Over the following weeks, Dr. Richard tried repeatedly to talk to Margaret about reconciliation, but she stood firm in her decision. Their 2 children, 15-year-old Emma Rose and 12-year-old Ethan, stayed with their mother, visiting their father only on weekends. Dorothy turned the house into a real home again. She planted new flowers in the garden, cooked the family's favorite recipes, and every night told Tommy stories before bedtime. About 2 months after everything was resolved, Gladys stopped by the house for a visit. She brought unexpected news. Mrs. Dorothy, I found out something else about Dr. Richard's schemes. Remember when I mentioned seeing him talking to a man in a suit at the bakery? Yes, I remember, Gladys. Well, I spoke to Frank at the bakery, and he told me that man was from a construction company. Dr. Richard was trying to sell the house to them for a very low price, as if he was in a hurry to get rid of it. You mean he not only wanted to steal our house, but was also going to sell it for peanuts? Exactly. And Frank said the construction guy mentioned they were interested because they wanted to tear it down and build an apartment building in its place. Dorothy shuddered at the thought of her home being demolished. The property was nearly 100 years old, built by Robert's grandfather, and passed down through generations. Margaret was furious when she heard the news. Mum, this means Richard not only stole our house, but was going to destroy our entire family history. Thank goodness we found out in time, dear. Our home will remain here for future generations. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. 3 months had passed since the truth was uncovered. The family had found a new harmony. Dorothy spent her days caring for Tommy while Jennifer worked as a receptionist at a medical clinic. Margaret taught classes in the morning and helped with household chores in the afternoon. One Saturday morning, as Dorothy watered the garden plants with Tommy assisting her, an elegant woman stopped in front of the house. It was Mrs. Patricia, a 65-year-old woman who lived 3 houses down. Mrs. Dorothy, how wonderful to see you back. I heard what happened and wanted to say all the neighbors were outraged by the situation. Hello, Mrs. Patricia. How are you? Thank you for your kind words. Actually, I came because I have a proposal for you. You know I'm the president of the neighborhood association, right? Yes, I do. Well, we've been thinking about creating a project to highlight the historic homes in the area. Your property is one of the oldest and best preserved. We'd love to include it in the project as a model for other families. Dorothy was intrigued by the proposal. Mrs. Patricia explained that the project would involve minor restoration work, supported by the city, to maintain the original features of the older homes. The best part is that your family would become ambassadors of the project. It could bring in extra income through guided tours and cultural events. That sounds interesting, Mrs. Patricia, but I'll need to discuss it with my family first. Of course, there's no rush. Think it over carefully. Your home has such a special energy. Anyone who steps inside can feel the love within these walls. That evening at dinner, Dorothy told the family about Mrs. Patricia's proposal. Margaret was thrilled by the idea. "Mom, this would be wonderful. Our home has always been special, and now others could learn its history." "Grandma, would people really come visit our house?" asked Tommy, his eyes shining. "Yes, sweetheart. And you could tell them about the garden and the flowers we planted together." Jennifer also supported the idea. She was studying tourism through an online course and saw the proposal as a chance to apply what she was learning. "Grandma, I could help organize the tours and create informational materials about the house and family history." Dorothy smiled, seeing how united her family was and how full of plans for the future they'd become. After so much turmoil, there was finally peace in her heart. The following week, Dr. Richard showed up at the house unannounced. Margaret was at work, Jennifer had taken Tommy to the doctor, and Dorothy was alone tending to the garden. "Mrs. Dorothy, I need to speak with you," he said, standing at the gate. "Dr. Stevens, I have nothing to say to you. If you have something to discuss, speak to my daughter through her lawyer. Please, just 5 minutes. It's about our grandchildren." Dorothy hesitated. Emma Rose and Ethan were struggling with their parents' separation, and she knew they missed the family life they once had. "Fine, but we'll talk right here in the garden, and only for 5 minutes. Mrs. Dorothy, I know I made terrible mistakes. I was desperate over debts I'd hidden from Margaret and made poor choices. Dr. Stevens, you didn't make mistakes. You committed crimes. You forged documents, lied to your wife, and forced an elderly woman out of her home. Those aren't mistakes, they're choices. You're right. I have no excuses for what I did, but I want to try to make things right, especially for my children. And how do you plan to do that? First, I want to formally apologize to the whole family. Second, I want to contribute financially to the household, since I know my separation from Margaret has reduced the family's income." Dorothy Wilson watched him closely. There was something different about Dr. Richard Stevens. He seemed genuinely remorseful, not trying to manipulate the situation to his advantage like he used to. "Dr. Stevens, I appreciate your words, but I'm not the one you need to talk to. It's your wife and children. They're the ones who suffered the most from your lies. Margaret doesn't want to speak to me. I've tried several times. And why should she? You broke her trust in the cruelest way." "I know, but I don't know how to prove I've changed." "Real change takes time to prove, Dr. Stevens. Trust isn't regained with words, it's with consistent actions over time." Just then, Margaret arrived from work and saw her ex-husband talking to her mother in the garden. She tensed up immediately. "What are you doing here, Richard?" "Hi, Margaret, I came to apologize. We've talked enough. If it's about the kids, speak to my lawyer." "Margaret, please. I know I ruined everything, but we're still a family. Emma Rose and Ethan are suffering because of this separation." "A family?" Margaret laughed bitterly. "Richard, a family is built on trust, respect, and honesty. You destroyed all of that when you decided to steal from my mother." "I was desperate." "Being desperate doesn't justify hurting innocent people. You took my elderly mother from her home, Richard. She could have been cold, hungry. Something terrible could have happened to her and Tommy." Dr. Stevens hung his head, clearly ashamed. Dorothy watched the conversation silently, seeing the pain in both of them. "Margaret," Dorothy said softly, "maybe you two should talk calmly, without anyone else around. It's been many years of marriage, 2 children. This isn't a simple situation." Mom, after everything he's done, you still think I should give him a chance? Sweetheart, I'm not saying you should give him a chance. I'm saying you should talk properly so you can make the best decision for Emma, Rose, and Ethan. They need to understand what's happening and feel secure about the future. Margaret thought about her mother's words. Emma Rose had asked several times why her father didn't live with them anymore, and Ethan had been struggling in school since the separation. Fine, Richard, we'll talk, but it'll be in couples therapy, which I'll schedule. If you really want to fix things, you'll have to commit to a professional help process. I'll do anything, Margaret, anything. Dorothy went inside to give the ex-couple privacy. Through the window, she saw them talk for nearly an hour. When Margaret came in, she seemed more at ease. How did it go, sweetheart? It was hard, Mom, but necessary. We scheduled some sessions with a therapist to see if there's any chance of rebuilding trust. And how do you feel about that? Confused. On one hand, I'm still angry about what he did. On the other, I think about our kids and the good years we had together before all this happened. Sweetheart, whatever decision you make, your family will support you. The important thing is that you feel at peace with your choices. The therapy sessions started the following week. Dr. Stevens showed willingness to work on his issues, especially the gambling addiction he'd hidden from the family for years. Margaret also used the space to express all her pain and disappointment. Meanwhile, the Neighborhood Association project began to take shape. Dorothy Wilson agreed to participate, and her home became the first to receive the restoration improvements. Craftsmen specializing in historic houses came to assess which elements needed special care. Mrs. Wilson, said the architect in charge of the project, your home is in excellent condition. It's rare to find properties from this era so well maintained. My husband was always very diligent with upkeep, and I learned from him to cherish every corner of our home. Do you have any old photographs of the property? That would be very helpful for the project. Dorothy remembered she had several photo albums stored in the attic. She went up with Jennifer to look for them. Grandma, this place is amazing, Jennifer exclaimed upon seeing the attic, neatly organized with antique trunks and family heirlooms. Your great-grandfather Robert always said the attic was like a museum of our family history. They found 3 albums with photos of the house dating back to 1950, showing how it had been preserved over the decades. There were also old documents, love letters between Dorothy and Robert, and even vintage toys from their children. Grandma, this is a treasure. We could use this material to create an exhibit about the house and our family's history. What a wonderful idea, Jenny. Your great-grandfather would be so proud to know our story. Will inspire others. The project gained attention in the community. Local newspapers wrote about the initiative, and the city government expressed interest in expanding the program to other historic neighborhoods in New York City. Dorothy became something of an ambassador for historic homes, welcoming visitors twice a week to share the property's story and tips for preserving historic houses. Tommy loved the visiting days. He had become his great-grandmother's official assistant, helping greet guests and showing off the garden they tended together. That rose there was planted the day I was born, he proudly told visitors, and that mango tree has been here since my grandma Dorothy was little like me. During one visit, an elderly woman was deeply moved by the Wilson family's story. Mrs. Wilson, she said with tears in her eyes, my story is so much like yours. My son-in-law also tried to take my home from me after my husband passed, but I didn't have the courage to fight like you did. It's never too late to stand up for your rights, Dorothy replied, taking the visitor's hand. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right even when we're afraid. Margaret and Dr. Richard Stevens continued therapy. Slowly, they were rebuilding their communication and addressing issues that had been neglected during years of marriage. Mom, Margaret said one day, I think I'm starting to understand what happened better. Richard really was sick with his gambling addiction, and that clouded his judgment about right and wrong. And how do you feel about that, dear? I'm still hurt, but I also feel sorry for him. It must have been awful carrying that burden alone for so long. Sweetheart, forgiveness doesn't mean you have to go back to him. It means you don't have to carry anger in your heart forever. I know, Mom. We're taking things slow. Maybe one day we can be a family again, just in a different, truer way. Emma, Rose, and Ethan began joining some family therapy sessions. They were happy to see their parents talking again without fighting. "Grandma Dorothy," Emma Rose said during a Sunday lunch, "thank you for not giving up on our family. If you hadn't fought for the house, our parents might never have uncovered the truth and found a way to understand each other." My granddaughter, a strong family is one that faces difficulties together without hiding the truth from each other. You're young now, but you'll carry this lesson into your own families someday. The Historic Homes project brought significant extra income for the family. Dorothy decided to use part of the money to renovate the backyard, creating a larger play area for the children. Jennifer finished her tourism course and landed a job at an agency specializing in cultural tourism. Her experience with the tours at her grandmother's house had given her practical knowledge highly valued in the market. "Grandma, I got my dream job thanks to what I learned here at home. I'll be organizing tourist itineraries through historic neighborhoods in New York City." "How wonderful, my dear. See how sometimes the hardest moments lead us to paths we never imagined." Dr. Richard completed a treatment program for gambling addiction and started attending support groups. He also volunteered to help other families facing legal troubles. "Mrs. Dorothy," he said during a visit, "I want you to know that volunteering has helped me understand the pain I caused our family. I'm truly sorry and committed to being a better person." "Dr. Richard, I can see you're trying. That means so much to me and the whole family." 6 months into therapy, Margaret and Dr. Richard decided to attempt a gradual reconciliation. They didn't move back in together right away, but began spending more time as a family, working to rebuild their relationship. "Mom," Margaret said, "we're doing things differently this time. Richard will keep living in his apartment for now, but we're dating again like we're meeting for the first time. What an interesting idea, dear. That way you can build a stronger foundation." The Wilson family home became a neighborhood landmark. People from other cities came to see the historic preservation project, and Dorothy always welcomed them warmly. Tommy grew up surrounded by family stories and traditions. By 6, he could already tell visitors about the house's history and loved helping his great-grandmother in the garden. "Grandma Dorothy," he said one day as they planted new seedlings, "when I grow up, I'll live in this house and take care of it like you do, okay?" "Of course, my love. This house will always need someone to love it as we do." Jennifer met a young man named Nathan at a cultural tourism event. He was a historian who fell for her and the Wilson family's story. They started dating, and he became a regular at the house. "Grandma," Jennifer said one day, "Nathan wants your blessing to date me officially. My dear, if he makes you happy and treats you and your son with respect, you have my blessing." Nathan proved to be respectful and caring. He helped with guided tours, sharing historical insights about the house and neighborhood. The family was growing and thriving. Margaret and Dr. Richard made their reconciliation official after a year of therapy and dating. They renewed their vows simply in the family garden, with only close relatives present. "Mrs. Dorothy," Dr. Richard said during the ceremony, "thank you for teaching me that family is about forgiveness, growth, and second chances. You're the heart of this family." Dorothy cried with joy, seeing her family reunited and happy again. At 72, she'd fought for her home and achieved far more than she'd imagined. She'd saved her family. The Historic Homes project expanded to other neighborhoods, and Dorothy Wilson was invited to become the program's ambassador for the entire city. She accepted with joy, knowing she could help other families appreciate their historical and family heritage. "Grandma," said Emma Rose during her 16th birthday, "when I have my own family, I want to raise my children with the same values you taught us: family, truth, courage, and love." My dear, those values are the greatest treasure we can leave for future generations, far more precious than any house or money. The house that was nearly lost to greed and lies became a symbol of resilience and family unity. Dorothy transformed her pain into strength, her outrage into action, and her house into an even more welcoming home. On Sundays, the whole family gathered for lunch in the garden. Dorothy looked around the table and saw 4 generations living in harmony: herself, Margaret, Jennifer, and Tommy. Dr. Richard Stevens had become part of the family again. but now based on truth and mutual respect. "Do you know what makes me proudest?" Dorothy said to Nathan during one of these lunches. "It's not keeping the house. It's keeping the family together despite all the hardships. Mrs. Wilson, you're an inspiration to all of us. Your courage changed the destiny of this entire family." Tommy, now 7 years old, ran through the garden with the other children in the family. Emma Rose and Ethan had become loving older siblings to him, and Nathan had proven to be a present and caring father figure. The house still welcomed visitors interested in historical preservation. Dorothy had become a sought-after speaker at events about family heritage and active aging. During a talk at a community center, an elderly woman in the audience asked a question that deeply moved Dorothy. "Mrs. Wilson, what would you say to a woman our age who's going through a similar situation and has lost hope?" Dorothy thought for a moment before answering. "I'd say age has given us wisdom, experience, and the understanding that it's worth fighting for what's rightfully ours. We're not weak, we're seasoned. We're not tired, we're experienced. And most of all, we're never alone when we have true family and friends by our side." The Historic Homes Project had benefited over 50 families in the city. Many had discovered important documents, recovered family memories, and found ways to honor their heritage. Dorothy received thank you letters from people inspired by her story. One that touched her most came from an 80-year-old woman who had reclaimed her family home after reading about the Wilson family's case in the newspaper. "Mrs. Wilson, your courage inspired me not to give up the fight for the house where I raised my children. Like you, I found documents proving my right to the property. Today, at 80, I'm back in my home thanks to your example." Jennifer and Nathan married in a simple ceremony in the family garden. Tommy was the ring bearer, proudly carrying the rings. Dorothy cried with joy seeing her granddaughter find true love. "Grandma," Jennifer said during the celebration, "thank you for fighting for our home. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have such a special place to marry and start my new family. My dear, this house has always been about family. Now it will welcome another member with all the love in the world." Nathan hugged Dorothy warmly. "Mrs. Wilson, I promise to care for Jennifer and Tommy with all the love they deserve, and I promise to help preserve the history of this wonderful family." Life in the Wilson family home had found a new rhythm of peace and prosperity. The guided tours continued to bring extra income and recognition for the preservation work. Dorothy Wilson had become a respected figure in the community. Margaret got a promotion at work and began running a public school. Dr. Richard Stevens had opened a law office specializing in family law, offering free services to people in vulnerable situations. "Mrs. Dorothy," he said during a family dinner, "working to help other families has made me better understand the value of what we have here. I'll never take for granted the privilege of being part of this family again." Emma Rose finished high school and decided to study architecture, inspired by her grandmother's historic preservation project. Ethan developed an interest in history and wanted to follow in Nathan's footsteps. "Grandma Dorothy," Emma Rose said, "I want to specialize in restoring old houses. That way I can continue the work you started here." "How wonderful, my dear. You'll be able to help so many families preserve their memories and traditions." Tommy, now 8 years old, had become the family's official chronicler. He wrote little stories about the visits they received and drew maps of the garden showing where each plant had been planted. "Grandma Dorothy," he said one day, "when I grow up I'm going to write a book about our family. I'll tell how you saved our home and our family." "What a marvelous idea, sweetheart. Our story truly deserves to be shared with others." The house remained a landmark in the neighborhood. New neighbors always came to see the property and learn its history. Dorothy welcomed everyone with hospitality, serving tea and sharing the family's adventures. During the 3rd anniversary of the Historic Homes Project, the city organized a special event to honor the participating families. Dorothy was chosen to represent all the families who had benefited. In her speech, she said, "This initiative has taught me that preserving our history isn't just about keeping old buildings standing. It's about keeping alive the traditions, values, and love that built our families over the years. Every old house holds stories of courage, perseverance, and family unity. When we preserve these homes, we also preserve the hope that future generations will cherish what truly matters in life." The event was deeply moving. Several families shared their stories of restoration and preservation. Dorothy felt proud to have been one of the pioneers of the movement. Jennifer announced she was expecting her second child. The news filled the house with joy and excitement. Tommy was thrilled at the idea of having a little brother or sister. "Grandma Dorothy," he said, "when the baby is born, I'll teach them all about our house, just like you taught me." "Of course, my love. That way our story will keep passing from generation to generation." The fifth generation of the Wilson family was on its way. Dorothy thought about how happy her late husband Robert would have been to know the house they loved so much would remain home to their descendants. Nathan had become a very present father to Tommy and was eagerly awaiting the new baby. He had adapted perfectly to the Wilson family dynamic and contributed his own family traditions. Dr. Richard and Margaret were closer than ever. Therapy had strengthened their communication, and they had learned to be more open with each other about all aspects of life. "Mom," Margaret said one day, "thank you for teaching me that family is about forgiveness and growth. If it weren't for your example, I might never have given Richard a second chance." "My dear, forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about choosing love over bitterness. You've both grown so much and become better people through this experience." The Wilson family home had become a symbol of resilience and renewal in the neighborhood. Other families going through hard times sought out Dorothy for advice and support. She always welcomed them warmly, offering not just comforting words but also practical guidance on handling family and property matters. One afternoon, as Dorothy watered the garden, a young mother appeared at the gate holding a small child. She looked desperate. "Mrs. Wilson, my name is Ashley. I read about your story in the paper and came to ask for help. My father-in-law is trying to take the house where I live with my daughter after my husband left." Dorothy invited Ashley inside for tea. She listened carefully and patiently to the young woman's story. "Ashley, the first thing you need to do is gather all the paperwork related to the house. Then, get legal help. I know some lawyers who do volunteer work for cases like yours." "But Mrs. Wilson, I don't have money to pay a lawyer." "My dear, there's free help available. I'll give you some contacts, and remember, you have rights. Don't let anyone intimidate you or tell you otherwise." Dorothy wrote down the numbers of organizations offering free legal aid on a piece of paper. She also gave Ashley the phone number of Dr. Stevens, who had specialized in helping vulnerable families. "Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. You've given me hope when I had none left." Ashley, never lose hope. Sometimes solutions come when we least expect them. What matters is keeping up the fight for our rights and our children. Situations like this became common. Dorothy had become a guiding light for women facing family or financial struggles. She was always willing to help, sharing her experience and offering emotional support. Dr. Stevens began taking on the cases Dorothy referred to him pro bono. This volunteer work had become his way of giving back to society and making up for past mistakes. "Mrs. Wilson," he said one day, "working with these families has made me realize how many people go through situations like the one we caused for our own family. This is my way of trying to make a difference in the world." Dr. Stevens, seeing you use your professional skills to help others fills me with pride. It shows people truly can change and grow. Jennifer gave birth to a beautiful baby girl named Olivia in honor of her great-grandfather. The baby's arrival brought even more joy to the Wilson home. Tommy proved to be a loving big brother, always eager to help care for his baby sister. Dorothy, now a great-grandmother to 2 children, felt her heart overflowing with happiness. "Grandma Dorothy," Tommy said as he watched his sister sleep, "when Olivia grows up, I'll tell her all the stories you told me about our family." "How sweet, my love. That way our story will never be forgotten." The house was once again filled with children's laughter, baby cries, and all the joy a new life brings to a family. Dorothy spent hours watching the 2 children play in the garden she loved so much. Emma Rose started college to study architecture, just as she'd planned. Ethan decided to major in history, inspired by family stories and Nathan's work. "Grandma Dorothy," Emma Rose said during a visit, I'm learning restoration techniques that'll help me preserve our home even better in the future. How wonderful, my dear. Having someone in the family with technical knowledge will ensure our home stays well cared for many years. The Historic Homes project had grown so much, it became municipal policy. Dorothy Wilson was invited to join the advisory board of the program, representing the beneficiary families. "Mrs. Wilson," said the mayor during the board's inauguration ceremony, "you've become a symbol of resilience and preservation in our city. Your example has inspired hundreds of families to value their historical heritage. Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to contribute. I believe preserving our history means preserving our identity as a community." Dorothy, now 74, had become a respected public figure. She received invitations to speak in other cities, and her story had been featured in nationally circulated magazines and newspapers. Despite the visibility, she never lost the simplicity and humility that always defined her. She continued welcoming visitors into her home with the same warmth as ever. During an interview for a women's magazine, the journalist asked, "Mrs. Wilson, what's the secret to keeping a family united through so many hardships?" "The secret is never giving up on love. When we face problems, it's easy to let anger and resentment take over our hearts. But true love is stronger than any difficulty. It takes patience to listen, courage to forgive, and wisdom to understand that we're all capable of change and growth." The interview was published and brought even more recognition to Dorothy's work. She began receiving letters from readers across the country, sharing their own stories and asking for advice. Nathan completed his master's degree in history and decided to write a book about family heritage preservation in the US, using the Wilson family's story as the main case study. "Mrs. Wilson," he said, "I'd like to tell our family's story to inspire others. May I have your permission?" "Of course, Nathan. If our story can help other families, I'll be thrilled." Nathan's book became a bestseller in the family memoir category. Dorothy's story inspired readers of all ages, especially older women who identified with her journey of courage and determination. Margaret received a promotion and became a regional education supervisor. Dr. Richard Stevens expanded his volunteer work and opened a free legal clinic. Emma Rose excelled in university and received a scholarship to specialize in historical preservation. Ethan began working on a documentary about the families in the Historic Homes project as his high school capstone. He interviewed Dorothy and other participants, creating a valuable audio-visual record of the program. "Grandma Dorothy," Ethan said while editing the documentary, "your story is the most touching of all. You didn't just save our home, you saved our entire family. My grandson, what saved our family was the love that always existed between us. I only fought so that love could keep flourishing." Tommy, now 10, had become an excellent tour guide for the house visits. He knew every detail of the family history and loved telling visitors about every corner of the property. Olivia, 2 years old, now walked through the garden, holding her older brother's hand. Dorothy loved watching them explore the same little spots where she had played decades earlier. The Wilson family home had become a treasure not just for the family, but for the entire community. Architecture and history students visited for technical tours, learning about preservation techniques and the importance of family heritage. Dorothy always made sure to welcome these groups, sharing not just technical details, but also reflections on the value of honoring family traditions. During one of these visits, a young student asked a question that deeply moved her. "Mrs. Dorothy, weren't you afraid to stand up to someone as influential as your son-in-law? How did you find the courage to fight?" "My dear, fear was always there, but I learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done even when you're afraid. When you fight for something bigger than yourself, like your family and your dignity, you find a strength you never knew you had." Her answer moved not just the student, but everyone present. Many left the visit inspired to cherish their own families and traditions more. The 5th anniversary of uncovering the truth about the forged documents was celebrated with a big party at the Wilson family home. All the friends who had helped during the tough times were invited. Gladys, Robert's former secretary, was already retired but remained a constant presence in the family's life. Shirley, the housekeeper who had risked her job to help Dorothy, had become like a daughter to her. Mrs. Barbara, from the county clerk's office, had retired and regularly attended activities at the Historic Homes Project. Mrs. Patricia, from the Neighborhood Association, still chaired the program and had become a close friend of Dorothy's. "Dorothy," Mrs. Patricia said during the party, "you didn't just change your own life. You changed the life of our entire community. The project that started with your home now benefits hundreds of families." "Patricia, none of this would have been possible without the support of people like you. I've learned that real change happens when people come together for a greater cause." During the celebration, Dr. Richard gave an emotional speech. "Mrs. Dorothy, 5 years ago, I was a lost man, consumed by addiction and greed. You could have hated me forever for what I did. But you taught me about forgiveness, second chances, and the true meaning of family. Today, I'm a better man because of your example." Dorothy was moved by her son-in-law's words. Seeing his transformation over the years had been one of the greatest joys of her journey. The party went on late into the night, with music, homemade food, and plenty of stories being shared. The children played in the garden while the adults chatted on the porch. Dorothy watched it all with a smile, feeling deep gratitude for everything she had achieved. At 75, she hadn't just reclaimed her home, she had helped create a preservation movement that benefited hundreds of families. Most importantly, she had kept her family united and strong, proving that true love can overcome any obstacle. End of story. Now tell us, what did you think of Dorothy's journey? Do you believe she made the right choice in forgiving Dr. Richard? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories.